Okay, well, thank you so much again for being here on this rainy, dreary Tuesday evening. I appreciate you being here. This is a big event, part of Art and Design Week. We have lots of events going on this week. So thank you for choosing to be here on this one. So we're going to talk about basically everything branding tonight, and online particularly. And we have some great alumni here to kind of talk about what they've seen, what's changed in the last year, what hasn't changed in the last year. And so just some basic housekeeping. I think we're going to utilize the chat. So if you have questions, please type them in and I'll relay it to our panelists. And I did want to mention we have some more events coming up throughout the week. There are tons, and so I didn't put them all on the slide because it would be way too much. So I'm going to put the link to the full rundown of everything into the chat so you can have it. But this is some of the events that are coming up later this week. And with that being said, I am going to turn off the PowerPoint because we do not need it going forwards. And we're going to start on our panel tonight. Okay, let's see here. All right, there we go. And I'm just waiting for Ashley. Hi, hi everyone. I forgot to introduce myself for those who I have not met yet. I am Liz Julian. I am a career counselor here at UW-Stout. I advise lots of majors, but I also advise all the BFA majors. So for your students, if you come into career services, most likely you will see me. So enough about that though. So to start us off tonight, if our panelists would introduce themselves a little bit about what they studied at Stout, and their career path so far, just so people know what background you're bringing to the table. Veronica, would you mind going first?
Not at all. Hi, I am Veronica McCracken. I graduated in 2012 from UW-Stout, and I was an interior design major with a little bit of industrial design sprinkled in there too. So I worked for a creative agency right out of school called Make Retail. So we did mostly retail stuff for Google, and then transitioned to MSR Design. So that's an architecture and interiors firm in Minneapolis, and that is where I still am at, and it has been about 7 years there. So a lot. Oh, anything I talk about tonight might be kind of in that lens, and then whatever I am personally kind of doing on the side as well. I'll try to speak to that too. Anything else that I should talk about, Liz?
I made it real broad, so you're good.
Okay, cool.
Aaron, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Aaron White. I studied industrial design at UW-Stout. I graduated, I think, December 2017. So I started at 3M just about 4 years ago now as an intern in the summer of 2017, and then stayed on throughout my last semester, interned at Johnson Health Tech. They do exercise equipment stuff down in Madison. Did that the summer before. So yeah, 2 internships, and yeah, one of them turned into full-time job that I am still currently at 3M. So I work on all sorts of different things at 3M, but primarily Post-it and Scotch products in our consumer business group. So.
Great. Ashley, would you go?
Yes. Hey, everyone. My name's Ashley Hohnstein. I graduated from Stout spring 2013, which is wild. It goes very fast. I studied graphic design. My first year out of school, I kind of bounced around between a couple different internships, worked at an ad agency called Fame, then a letterpress studio. And then almost a year to the day from graduating, I got a job offer at Target, and I've now been there for almost 7 years, which is wild. I mainly work on branding and packaging work for all of our own brands. So think things like Market Pantry or Wonder Shop or just different brands that are exclusive to Target. I work on all of the logos and packaging for that, typically in the high level space. Other than that, like outside of work, I sometimes do freelance projects. I do a lot of illustration and lettering work. And yeah, that's probably about it.
Great, thank you. Grace, you still there?
Yes, yep.
Just want to make sure.
Yes. Yeah, I'm Grace Pedersen, an art director and designer at Ordinary Folk. I graduated December 2017. I had to think back to it. Seems spring or fall, whatever. I graduated with a degree in entertainment design, animation concentration with a drawing minor. And I worked for a couple years in Minneapolis at a place called Motion 504 with a lot of wonderful people, a fairly small team, but that's kind of fun. I think I really like that. And now at Ordinary Folk, I've been there almost a year and a half. They're based out of Vancouver, Canada, but I work remotely. I was even before COVID. So I was able to visit before COVID. So I'm kind of been working that workflow for a while, but I'm actually living just outside of Eau Claire, Wisconsin currently. And I do a lot of storyboarding and working with freelancers to storyboard and design for various projects, long-term and short-term. So that's me.
Great, thank you, everyone. So going forward, unless you all really want me to call on you, let's just jump in if you have something. If you don't, it's okay. So just to start, how do you manage your personal brand? And I know it's a really broad question. And how has that changed or not in the last year?
Crickets. I will just jump in because why not? I would say that like any of us, there's like obviously so many platforms that we can use. And I would just advocate like using whatever feels the most comfortable for you in the best like sector that you find is like connecting with people and networking with the people that you want to. I will also say that being at the same firm for 7 years, I am very stagnant in this topic. So I think we can all just attest to the fact that like keeping up on a portfolio and keeping up on kind of documenting your growth is always a challenge, and it's always something that I think, yeah, we all just moving forward from undergrad and beyond, like something we all like, it's just something we have to keep tabs on, and none of us are perfect. I'm not. So I don't know, I guess in terms of like COVID stuff, everything has moved a lot more online and a lot more virtual. So I think that is conducive to some platforms and some ways of kind of representing yourself. And I'll pass it off. It was kind of broad and conceptual, but that's where I'll start.
I can hop in. I would say that, like, as a student thinking about your personal brand, I would almost encourage you to think about it more as like building a personal network. Like, where are the people you want to get to know, and where are the types of spaces that you want to get involved in? I know for me, things like Instagram and Twitter are super important for graphic designers because people share their work on there. It's easy to interact with people back. Just thinking like, how do you make friends it's the same thing. Like, how do you build your personal brand so people want to be friends with you? That's the way I think about it. Kind of echoing Veronica, like the first couple years out of school, like I was very on top of my personal brand. And as you kind of get settled into a job and have been there for a while, it kind of fades off. But I would say like when new projects come out, I try to like boost them, obviously, and kind of share them. I just had like the biggest project I've ever worked on come out. I'm trying to think about like, how do I tell the story of that on my social media without having to go through an entire portfolio refresh. But yeah, I think it's like figuring out like what comes naturally to you, and then think about where are the people that you want to connect with based. And that's a good place to invest like your time in your personal brand.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. Especially with, I didn't jump in right away because I'm in the same boat of as you're in your job, it kind of, you're not in that student phase as much anymore. But at the same time, like wanting to still be invested in personal projects and still be posting things where people are, because that's where you're building community too. And I think so much of the industry is hand in hand with community and networking, so much more than I thought there was when I was a student. So things like Behance, Instagram, Twitter, and then getting connected with groups involved in your industry, such as for animation, like School of Motion has some good community Facebook groups, Panimation, what's another one? Motion Hatch, Motionographer, things like that are always good ways to get connected to and show your work and discover more work.
Yeah, I'll wrap up that question with saying it sounds like we're all in the same boat with complacency in our current positions. Because yeah, and it's the managing part is a lot of work in itself. It's it's a bit of curating and being present and social. I work with a coworker of mine. He has like 11,000 something followers on Instagram, and he's spoken of just like the exhaustion of it, like a weight on his back, feeling like he has to post or things like that. And so I was actually thinking, I was like, I should have just asked him if he wants to do this panel. He does a lot more than than I do, but yeah, I think there's a balance because he's talked about some of the benefits. And coming out of school, I thought that like to be a big designer or whatever grown-up designer, you had to be like constantly engaged on all of this stuff, and it helps, but to a point. And I think building your network can happen through Instagram posts, and it can also happen just by finding these different groups within the design community and either going to their events or their virtual events these days. Yeah, you can build your community and your brand that way as well. So, but yeah, otherwise, I think, a lot of things have, I haven't been out of school that long. It's been 3-4 years. And I think the pandemic accelerated some changes quite quickly with, I see a lot more portfolios online. But a lot of things are also still the same. Like you kind of always need a PDF still, so that somebody can put it in a folder on their computer or something. But yeah, I think Teams etiquette, that's a new thing, or Zoom etiquette, whatever you're using. That's a way of like your brand, but for the most part, things are fairly the same still. But
kind of build off of that. What sort of social media, and I get it, it's going to depend a lot, but social media should students be involved in, like Instagram? And how useful is LinkedIn in your specific field?
I can jump in again. I hate to like put Instagram on a pedestal, and I also kind of hate preaching about social media because I think we all probably watch The Social Dilemma, and like there's this also like personal life attached to it. Like I don't know of anybody that has a personal Instagram and then a professional one. And maybe that exists. I don't know. I don't. But I use it. I also manage it for the company I work for. I think it has obvious benefits. So I think that's important. It's also visual. And then with stories, like that is a place that people are posting their process. And that historically has been a huge part of portfolios. Like we want to see more of your process. So like that's awesome, I think. And then but also just making sure you have those like balances, kind of what Erin was talking about. Like if it's draining, I don't know. I don't have any magic answers for how to manage that. LinkedIn, I think, is maybe still the best professional platform, at least that I've come across. And I don't really see that changing a whole lot. So I think keeping that up to date as much as you can is good. I'd maybe like to see more crossover, and maybe the rest of the panel can talk to that more. I don't know, like crossover with Instagram or crossover with LinkedIn and other platforms. I'm not super familiar with that, but that could be cool in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. My experience with LinkedIn is like, it's like where all of our bosses are. And like, yeah, we have to be on it, but like, it's not fun to update in the same way like Instagram is. So to me, it's like, yes, you should have one and you should keep it updated. But by no means should you be one of those people who like post inspirational quotes on there every day. Cause I just don't think that's worth the effort. But like something like Instagram, like I mean, in graphic design, at least, it's like a highly collaborative career. So it's like you're working with people all the time. So you like want to know what people are like. And so something like Instagram, you can kind of combine like your portfolio and who you are as a person. And I can get a really good idea looking at that if I want to bring somebody on as an intern or a contractor or recommend them to be hired by my boss, because I can see like, oh, look, I can see that they're a fun person and I like their work and they seem like their vibe is going to go with our team kind of a thing. So I think Instagram's really good for that. I mean, but again, LinkedIn's kind of just like the leader hype train. There's not really anything but you should just keep it up to date because it's not that hard and your boss is going to look at it kind of a thing. I also use it like when I was interviewing years ago, I would be able to like look up the people I was going to be interviewing with and kind of understand where they are within their companies. So like it's a good tool to have, but by no means is it ever going to be fun.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have a LinkedIn and I do like to keep it up to date. And I would also say, yes, you should keep it up to date. And I think it is worth having a profile. And it's nice to see if you're getting hired for a job, like people can kind of see where you worked or who might have worked there too, or other connections. Like it's a networking tool, but I don't use it. I hardly ever check it. I hardly use it. But I have gotten inquiries through LinkedIn before. And it's funny, we were just talking about this at work. Our producer, Stefan, was saying they've been getting like inquiries for the studio over LinkedIn. So that was kind of intriguing. And that projects have been kind of coming over LinkedIn a little bit more maybe. And it may be how much information you're putting on there and how active you are being. But like Ashley said, I don't think you need to be posting quotes or anything on LinkedIn. But I mean, I think it's worth having a profile. I mean, anywhere you could probably connect with people is somewhere you could get inquiries. So.
Yeah, I don't have too much else to add. On top of everything that was said, yeah, LinkedIn isn't really the fun place. Oftentimes I have like, I'll get a moment of panic when I remember that LinkedIn exists, and it's like, oh man, I gotta check my messages or something like. So yeah, it's good to kind of try and keep. Actually, maybe more so these days. I check it more often, but it's more there's more of like a formality around it. Like, feel like posts are more thought out and not so, yeah, it's not super personal, but it's one of those things that you should have it, and should be not like me and check your messages often. And yeah, same here. I've gotten a bit more inquiries as well through, not necessarily offers that wanted to take in any way, but if I got like a job offer or something from somebody on Instagram, I wouldn't really view that as like legitimate or something. So yeah, LinkedIn it might not be fun, but there's some benefits to the formality of it.
I'll just add quickly, I think we've been talking about it more on our end of things, which is what we're talking about. It's students too, like creating their profiles. But I think you can also learn a lot about a company by what they have on there as well. And like Ashley mentioned, even looking up employees or who you might be interviewing with. But yeah, understanding potential employers is kind of a nice part of that outside of just the website too. It might have a little more insight.
I think one thing that I want to point out though, like as we talk about like Instagram potentially being like a more fun tool versus LinkedIn, is like, yes, you can follow people that could potentially be your boss someday or creative directors you admire kind of a thing on Instagram, but it's important to remember to still kind of have like a sense of etiquette. Like I've had students reach out to me on Instagram and ask for like informationals in like a very casual tone, and it always catches me off guard where it's like, you're asking me for my time, like still go through the process of finding my email and email me this request versus like sliding in my DMs and hoping that like that's a casual, cool thing to do kind of a thing. If we've been chatting back and forth in comments, it's maybe a little bit more okay, but just keeping in mind that like people still want to be treated like professionals kind of a thing. So it's like, it's a good place to connect with people, but still like have a little bit of formality if you're hoping that like they'll actually answer it, because I don't go through my like people I don't follow inbox that often, and it's usually like a bunch of students. I'm like, email me, maybe then I'll look at it.
For those who might not know, like what is an informational interview?
Yeah, so informationals are one of my favorite tools for like job hunting. But basically like there's job interviews, of course, which is like there's a posting and you applied or maybe you were recruited. But an informational is basically like a coffee chat with like somebody that you want to either work for or a company you're interested in. But going through places like LinkedIn or Instagram and finding people you want to meet with and then emailing them and just asking for like, do you have a half an hour for me to like pick your brain about your career or about the company you work for? I'm really interested in it. I think the important thing is like, I usually know if somebody's reaching out to me, they want a job, but it's like, at least just act interested in the company or the work before just begging for a job kind of a thing. But it's a good way to build your network at places, especially smaller ones that maybe don't have openings as often, but they'll remember and they'll go, oh yeah, Ashley came in for an informational one time and like she was really fun and we should see if she's looking again, kind of a thing. Now they all happen over Skype or Zoom or whatever you use. But I mean, before it was like I would meet up with people at coffee shops, or when I was a student, like my spring break before I graduated, I think I did 2 informationals a day in Minneapolis and just kind of like packed my calendar with them. And it was just a way to get like interviews and meet places that like feel like a job opening's like the slimmest chance kind of a thing.
Okay, thanks. So students, if you have a question, type it in the chat, but we'll move on to a little bit about portfolios. Do you have a preferred well, oh gosh, where do we start on portfolios? Should students build a website or should they use a website that exists out there already?
Oh,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Grace.
Okay, I guess I was just gonna say for animation, I guess it would depend whether you are building the website because you're a developer and that's going to be part of your portfolio, or if your work, my advice would be to use the tools that will best display your work while giving you time to focus on the work that you do best so that you can display that work the best. I use Squarespace, but I know there's a ton more now, like Cargo. I know Adobe, I think Adobe has some kind of, is it through Behance? I know there's stuff like that. And I know there's a variety of like payment options too. I would say it's worth the investment to make your work look really good and present well and be interactive and easy for whoever's viewing it to go through it and look at things. So I would say, I don't know if you meant building, like actually building, developing the site, or going through like a service in order to get a website. But I would definitely, I encourage using your time on the work that you do and then use tools that are out there to help display the work that you do, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar in the sense that I think it's worth the investment. I've even thought recently that I should just build a website or start building my portfolio into a website just to have or then revise later. Not only to have it, but just to learn kind of the process through it. Because at least in industrial design, I mean, all the design fields are fairly competitive. So I'm sure it's the same in every field, but you're not going to not get a job because you don't have the latest format for your portfolio, but it's going to help. It's just like another trick in your back pocket if like you can also do this. I would say the best type of website is one that works. I've received a few portfolios from people or reviewed or tried to, and like unfortunately like the website was down or it crashed or like it wasn't working. So yeah, the one that works, I think people post to like Coraflot and Behance for industrial design, and that's just kind of posting the portfolio or PDF to a website. And kind of like I said, like if you don't have a Squarespace website, but your website is still, or your portfolio is still super, super good and it's on Behance, like we're not gonna, people are probably gonna hire based on your work and your portfolio rather than the medium that you're using. But yeah, and then to my other point that I mentioned earlier, just to have, you kind of have to do both. Like you kind of have to have the PDF version too for some jobs. Like you will need a PDF to post in the application itself, and there isn't a little line to post your website. So in both formats are different interaction wise. Like one you scroll through or go page to page. So I don't know. As I'm talking about this, I'm just dreading the thought of actually revamping my portfolio for it. It's a lot of work, but as Grace mentioned, I think worth the investment for sure.
Yeah, when I was like a sophomore and a junior, I don't think that things like Squarespace were really popular yet. So like I coded my own site for that. But now looking back, like that's not anything I do in my day-to-day, and I knew that then too. So if I had resources like the Behance Pro sites or Squarespace, I definitely would have done that sooner. It's a cost, and it's sometimes cost prohibitive, but there are free versions of some of these types of websites. And I will say, like the Squarespace that I made when I was a college senior is still the Squarespace I use today. It makes updating my portfolio so much easier because I can just drag in the pictures. And even if I end up changing the layout around, like you still have your projects kind of as projects and it just reformats into that. So I think things like that are also just easier if you're like in the middle of an internship that's really busy and you know that it's ending soon and you need to get some stuff uploaded. Like think about updating your Squarespace versus you need to like code a whole new section of your website. Like it's easier. You can do it in a day versus over the course of a couple of weeks kind of a thing. I would say the only place I could see it hurting is if you're like a web designer, because it's like kind of like if you were to show me web designs in like a printed portfolio, I'd be like, how does this work? How do I know you know what you're doing kind of a thing? And same with like if you're like using a Squarespace, I mean, maybe it doesn't matter as much, but I feel like that would be like the fun place to show off everything you could do kind of a thing.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think you guys covered it. Just manage your time and your efforts. And it'll show if you make a really great effort at a website, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. If it works, cool. If you're scrambling just to get something together, like don't sweat it. Your portfolio and your work will shine no matter what. So that's all I have.
And then I have one more thing to piggyback off of that. Your work will shine wherever you have it too. Is for animation, we're only seeing people's work via online. So even if it's like you have your work on your Instagram and Behance, like even if you don't have a website, if you're posting it somewhere, someone's going to see it. And so keeping those kinds of things well curated and linking things to linking other things that link to other things is hugely helpful. And a lot of the people we're finding, and we have an inspiration channel on our Slack at work, and we just post like random Instagram posts of work we come across, and we're like, wow, this is really cool. And then it's like, oh, I'll go to their page and I'll see their profile, and oh, look at all the other projects they did. So as for a job application, it is good to have a website, I think. And obviously look at what the job is calling for. But even with social media, that's already a strong portfolio building tool as well.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I do some intern hiring at Target, and sometimes I'll get resumes that don't even have a link to like social media or a website. So it's like, so you have to have something. You have to have your work somewhere. Like I understand, like if you're like, I can understand, and not every person, I feel like I have like professional friends that like want it to be all buttoned up and serious, but like if somebody's on their Instagram, I'd be like, cool, like I have a solid understanding of what you do here. But it's just like, it's got to be somewhere. And make sure you have something linked out on your resume when you're applying to those places that don't have like a website thing. You can't just like upload a resume and hope that I'm going to like spend the time Googling you kind of a thing.
So when you're, for lack of a better word, looking at a portfolio cold, as in you're looking at it on your own without the other person, what do you look for in that portfolio, and how is that different than when someone's talking with you through their materials?
I think what we're taught in school and how we present to like our class for critique is like you start from the beginning and it's this like storybook thing, and there's not always a lot of context right away because everyone's doing the same project. We know the deliverables, we know what we're about to talk about. And I think having that mind switch in terms of portfolios that you're sending to people that don't have that context is sometimes lost. So making sure you like introduce the theme, the concept, the whatever it is that your project is solving first to kind of like get the reader and the viewer grounded in what they're about to look at is super important. And then, yeah, just making sure like there's a cohesive flow. It does not need to be chronological. I think a lot of people make that mistake. Like do this, like include the stuff that's awesome and that you're most proud of and that you're most passionate about first, and or not necessarily first, I guess, but like, yeah, make sure it's in there, and the stuff that like you just had to put in there for mid-program review is not necessarily shining if it's not your best work kind of thing, or if it's not something you're passionate about. And I will stop there.
I would say if I'm looking at a portfolio cold, I kind of need to be clickbaited into like actually wanting to click on different projects. So like sometimes I'll get a portfolio that's got like little icons that represent the projects. Those icons mean nothing to me. Like it's a cool thing, it's like a concept, but like show me the overview or show me like that really great, like, oh, this is the whole system of packaging that you designed. That's like the thing that you're the proudest of. And that'll get me to click in. And then it's about telling that story. You know, like how do you want somebody to experience the project, and just assume that I'm not going to pick up on any details, but make sure you show me all those cool things you thought of. Like if you thought to put copy on the inside of the flap of a piece of packaging or something really cool, like make sure that stuff is documented, because that's what I'm looking for as somebody who works in branding and packaging, is that you have system thinking and you know how to add personality to your work, kind of a thing.
Yeah, going off that, I think it's very evident if you're excited about your work and have passion about it, and if you don't, and it's all the way how you present it. So like put forward all the things that you're like really want to get the job for, like what work do you want to do, and then make sure you're like building your portfolio around that, because it's evident seeing what you're most proud of, because if you're proud of it, you'll show it off. And I'd say that's where personal projects come in too. Like your personal projects can be portfolio pieces, and they can be great portfolio pieces. And maybe that's what'll get you a job. You just never know. So just really go after what you really enjoy doing and what you want to do, and what artists you look up to who do the same thing. Look at their work, look at their portfolios. How do they build themselves? How do they present themselves? And have your own personality. Don't like copy it, but get inspiration from what others are doing and build it your own way, so that people can see how excited you are and how much you want to learn about it. And I think that's what I'm really looking for, is a drive to learn more about like what you do best, I guess.
I want to jump in off of like the personal project idea. So if you're at Stout and you're interviewing in Minneapolis, typically people are going to be able to pick up what school you went to based on the projects that you have in your portfolio. So personal work is a really good way to stand out, because it's a good way to like get your personality in there. It's also like if everybody has the same project, I always would take my projects one step further or add in just a little bit more, even if it wasn't for class, but I would like do it by myself on the weekends or like extend it, because that way you stand out from the crowd, because again, it looks like you're excited about the work. And it looks like you care enough that you wanted to keep going, kind of a thing. And it's a really simple way to kind of stand out from your peers, because if you're at something like Portfolio 1-on-1 and you get 3 students from the U in the row, you start picking out like, oh, that's that project, and there's that project again. And you start just comparing those projects like you're in a class critique versus actually like thinking about the students' work as a whole, kind of a thing, and how they stand out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. With like the expanding or like just completely revising or you know, really beefing up a project. I sometimes see that like this notion that we're interested in seeing like the progression from when like the first project you did as like a sophomore or junior and where you got. But for the most part, we don't care where you were at all. So if you have the opportunity to beef something up, yeah, that's always good. I think maybe as Ashley said too earlier, that she kind of needs to be clickbaited into digging deeper, and I think that's super important. I think kind of unfortunately, one of the best tools an industrial designer can have is being a good graphic designer. And the better, you know, the more you build up those skills as a graphic designer, is going to help you sell, not only like sell your idea, but also figure out how to story tell. I think that there's a lot of times I see projects, and oftentimes from Stout, and it's kind of how I was taught too, is that you save your fancy renders for like the big reveal at the end. Well, they might not get to the end because you didn't like clickbait them into like digging all the way through. So I think, you know, getting to the point quick, and I think Veronica said about at school it's very like process, like deliverables, and that's not really a compelling story, like the how you did the project. Like first I did sketches, then we did our, you know, research, and then we built our first round prototypes, and then the second is like the best the best portfolios I've seen are like they hit you like bam, this is why this idea or this should exist, like get down to like the why, and then telling that story, like you kind of need your renderings or your work to tell the story, and it's pretty evident that you know how to do it by showing it. So there's kind of it's a balance. Like you don't
And
want
like
to
the
show
worst,
no.
sorry, Aaron, the worst
Go
thing
ahead.
that can happen is like the person reviewing it's like, hey, can I know more about how you got there? So you don't have to include literally everything. And sorry, I interrupted, but yeah.
No worries. Yeah. And that's it. If if it's flashy enough, like you'll get that interview to go in and tell them all the little stuff. But yeah, it can be helpful, yeah, to have like a flashy like hook type portfolio, and then maybe add some pages and stuff for the interview process. But yeah, that's the one thing that I see most is just a very rigorous, like, we did this, and you have to be as flashy as possible. Well, not like flashy in a sense, but make it look pretty. And we're all human. We all love, we're designers. We all love pretty images on screens. So, yeah.
So to moving on in the process a little bit, when interviewing online, what advice would you give to students, either from your own personal experience interviewing or being on the other side helping hire?
I guess I can start. I'd say, oh gosh, it's hard because everything's going online now. So it's like normal interviews in person are now online. It's a whole different thing. So what a good question. And I think the biggest thing is, and probably one of the hardest things is just try and be yourself, because online is intimidating. Trying to communicate online clearly is intimidating also, but your personality can still come through. Just be genuine and excited about your work. And I have, at least in the motion design industry, only really found people who are very kind and nice, and like that goes a long way too, is people love to work with nice people. So just kind of taking extra steps and just kind of it goes a long way, I guess. So I don't know if that's specific to online or just general interview advice, but that's all I got.
It's still true. So
I think the only thing that comes to mind for me, like specifically thinking about online, is I've had a lot of portfolio reviews with students in the last year where as they're sharing their screen, they forget that I'm watching it with them. And so like we'll start talking and they'll just stop mid-scroll. And it's like, think about where you're pausing. Like when you're scrolling and you start talking, like make sure it's centered on the image that we're talking about. Cause sometimes I'm just left looking at like the dead space at the end of their project. And it's like, oh, like go back and then I'll have a chance to look at it a little bit more, kind of a thing. Cause it's kind of like you're putting on a show. If you think about it. So it's like if you're sharing your screen with somebody, like what are they looking at while you're talking about things versus making you look at like a blank white spot or like your footer on your website kind of thing.
It's a very good point.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say even like interviewing for getting projects, I've kind of liked being online, so it doesn't have to be like super weird or scary. Like I have a Word document like shifted up really close to the top of my screen so that I have notes in case I forget something and they can't see it, and it's like by the camera, so I'm like making eye contact, and just little things like that that you can do to kind of start to feel more comfortable presenting and speaking in front of people, and interviewing, because hopefully it's not like this forever. But anyway, just silver lining in that sense. I think understanding how you work and what you're really passionate about is something to do. And I think as students, especially coming right out of school, you're like, I just got to get something. I just got to get something. And like, you can be selfish and you can like understand what you want and what you value and how passionate you are about certain things. So research the firms and the companies you're about to interview with and have some questions ready for the end, because that goes a long way too. It's definitely obvious when we're interviewing and someone's just like, okay, I'm done. Like, you have no questions, literally none. But that's an easy one. And then I forgot my last thing, but it'll come back to me. But yeah, I don't know. Being nice is good. Genuine's good. And yeah, have those notes. You can even literally put like a physical Post-it from 3M on your computer. So it's kind of nice that way.
Yeah, I don't know if I have too much to add. I think, yeah, that it's most of the same rules of in-person interviews kind of mostly carry over. I think, I mean, you could probably get away without showering if you really wanted to in remote. But I think that's probably the only difference. You still want to be a nice, just a nice person, because like Grace mentioned, it's just you want, nobody wants to work with people that aren't nice or seem to be just pleasant people to be around. I think, well, this is a little bit more like portfolio, but just, I think, well, pertinent to the whole branding conversation though, with like, I think just like be yourself, but don't, like having a brand is not necessarily like you are a product. Like when I don't know if this is still a thing. I see it sometimes, but when I was at Stout, it was like everyone made their logos, which was like a custom logo of their initials, and I don't know, some of them get really crazy or they're like plastered everywhere, and kind of seems like, if somebody came into an interview wearing like a hat with their like logo on it, that would be a little weird. So I think that carries over into the remote sense, or like in a portfolio, that I think if it's done tastefully or like humbly, I think it's a balance. But just that you're basically should say like, hey, I'm a human too, like I'm interested in working for you, getting to know you, not that like you're the hottest thing to walk out of Stout in the last decade or something. But yeah, went a little off topic, but yeah, that was my 2 cents.
Oh, I liked what you brought up, because it made me start thinking about like one of my favorite things about working from home the last year is I feel like I've been invited into people's homes. Like I feel like I'm closer with all my coworkers in a lot of way, because like we're literally in each other's like living rooms, or people are calling me from their kids' rooms and stuff like that. So like, yes, there are those kids that like would come straight out of school and have like the biggest ego and think that they're going to be like the hot shit at the agency kind of a thing. But now it's like, no, we're all at home. It's a level playing field. Like you're meeting with professionals that are giving time to you in the middle of like a really crazy year. And how do you show up and be yourself and be a human is really important, because it's like, it's way more intimate than like being invited into like an office room where we're all sitting in a conference room together meeting you. So it's different. The other thing I was thinking would be a really good question to ask is asking the people that you're interviewing with, how did you feel supported by your employer during COVID? Because I think like there's been a massive mixed bag of like how different employers supported their employees during this time. And to me, there are places I would never want to work knowing how they treated their employees. So like asking people like, how did you feel supported during this past year would be a really interesting way to get like an idea of like the culture in certain companies.
Oh, that's a super good question. Yeah, especially so pertinent to these weird times. And then there's one other thing I wanted to mention because is just emailing. Because everything's online and remote, like emailing is probably even more important than ever. It always was. It always was very important. But as far as building your network and just reaching out to studios, you might have an inkling you would just like to ask if they have any internships available, because some places don't, at least for motion design, don't even have like an internship process. And so all you have to do is really ask. And it's surprising how like one email can lead you somewhere. Our current intern just emailed us out of the blue because she's interested in design and she's done some drawing, and we could tell she had a really good like compositional eye for concepts, and she'd never worked in design before, but like even from something like that, she just had some stuff on her Instagram, you can tell, and it was through an email. So it could be so simple. And there's this book, the Freelance Manifesto. It's worth looking up. It has a whole section on like email etiquette and like tracking emails and kind of just like how to make yourself stand out through an email, which I never even thought about before, but is very interesting. So that's just something to kind of remember as we're all online.
That made me think of a piece of advice I was giving people last spring when they were graduating with like into like the biggest unknown was people might not have time for informationals because people are at home with their kids and it's just like totally different. So like, how do you still get noticed by somebody? And the kind of what I like kind of workshopped with some people was like the idea that email and ask for that informational, but also offer, can I ask you 2 questions over email? Because that to me is like, because like there are times where I'm just too mentally overwhelmed to even like book informationals. But if somebody were to say like, do you have time for this? Or could I send you 2 to 3 questions? And they were actually like really thought out personal questions. Yeah, I'd answer those. And I think it's just a way to still get on people's radars and show that you're a considerate person with empathy at the same time.
I would, so I don't think that this happens a lot, but it just happened like a few months ago that I was reached out to do an informational with someone, and it wasn't a big deal. Like we met and it was great, but we did a couple of back and forth and we were trying to schedule something, and he emailed me, I think sometime around noonish, asking if I could meet like this afternoon. And it's fine, not a big deal, but like almost 9 times out of 10, if you're asking the same day, it's probably not gonna happen. There's just yeah, I don't know. Well, 3M people joke that the 3M stand for meetings, and that is kind of how it is sometimes. So yeah, just try and give people leeway and see what they can do, a week out or so, because it's appreciated. Because I felt bad, like I felt like I was gonna come off as a jerk, like no, I don't have time for you today or something. But so yeah, just nice to leave some time in there.
Okay, well, approaching the end. This is not the whole subject of this presentation, but I did want to talk briefly about working remotely. Grace, I know you were working remotely before the last year, so you have a longer view perspective than most of us. just advice for students, and what do you think your companies are going to be doing going forwards? Like, how much are you still going to be doing some remote work? Is that going to still be a part of your world, hopefully, maybe in the future?
Yeah, I definitely don't see working remotely going away. I think a lot of companies are probably entertaining a hybrid approach. I think being in a design industry, we can't truly function our best way without the like in-person collaboration. Like it's just nothing comes close to literally just being able to like sketch over in someone's sketch versus like drawing your mouse and it's like a squiggly red line in annotation mode. So anyway, I guess long story short, definitely still gonna be a thing. I think even like, oh, I want to go on vacation, but I can work maybe the days that I'm traveling kind of thing. Like I think companies are realizing that we can do it and it's not that big of a deal. So it'll be more prevalent. And with our work too, like we'll do community engagement for projects or just anything with like client side. People are able to go and not have to like hire a babysitter or something. Like there's just a lot of benefits to being able to do things virtually, and I don't see it totally going away. Yeah.
I know that Target will be returning to some sort of hybrid model. They've been kind of teasing it for months, and they are kind of in the process of figuring out what that looks like for us. But I know for me personally, working from home has been great because as somebody who kind of is like a really weird combo of introvert and extrovert, it kind of provides me a chance to kind of like lean in on the days where I just feel like being solo and trying to just have a work day. And then I would really recommend trying to have like a dedicated workspace. I know an office is a major luxury, but like at least making sure you have like a station for like where you're going to be is probably the most important because then you can kind of shut it off at the end of the day and be done. But yeah, I think I'm anticipating going back to work 2 to 3 days a week, kind of full time, but we'll see how it all kind of pans out. I know that we're not going back till fall at the very earliest.
Oh, it's interesting to hear what even companies are talking about regarding getting back to work. Because Veronica, you're so right. There's nothing really that replaces just wheeling over to someone else's desk and like just drawing with them and like just brainstorming and things. But yeah, like mentioned, I was working remotely before. And actually, I think a lot of people in the motion design industry were, as far as freelancers go. And all the freelancers we work with, they're like all over the world, different time zones and things. Like we're working with one currently, she's so good, but she's in South Korea, so she's working during our night. And then we wake up in the morning and we're like, oh, look what you made. So it's kind of like, in some ways, it's very efficient because you could hire a couple people who are across the world who work on things. So things can go faster, but also things can be slower. Like you have to figure out meetings and figure out where everyone is in the world to have meetings and all this stuff. And how to communicate clearly has been kind of a very big thing I've been trying to work on more too, and how to communicate with different people online. Some people respond in some ways and some are others, and like because everyone's so unique, even in person, it's just kind of exaggerated more when you're online. So like been using a lot of like screenshots and drawovers and even just saying, hey, we can just chat really quick about it over Zoom might be easier sometimes, just to kind of like hash an idea out, or if feedback comes in from the client and it's like, okay, we got to talk about this right now. So I don't see it going away, and it has provided a lot of flexibility. But as far as preparing students, you're already getting a good look at what it's like with all your classes being online. So just know that that's kind of how it's working in work too. And I think the biggest thing that's made us be able to do that is using Slack. So even just knowing like you'll be using things like Zoom and Slack, and I know there's other ones like Monday and Asana, maybe other platforms to try and like communicate with teams, but just know that that's something that you'll be using in your day-to-day to communicate with each other.
Yeah, similar in my situation too. I don't think it'll completely go away. I know 3M is returning in some sense in the fall as well. Sounds like probably similar to kind of Target as well. I'm sure they talk to each other about this kind of stuff. Good friends. But yeah, so but I do think that I think we've been able to learn a lot of the benefits of working remotely. But there are certain things, especially as designers, something as simple as picking a color for something can be very difficult because I have one color on my screen, you have a different color on your screen. You know, and when you're in the office, you just open the Pantone book and it's all there. So there's just certain things that, as designers, from, picking a color together versus, or also just like the in-person collaboration. There are definitely benefits to remote collaboration too. But yeah, I'm thinking maybe, some sort of hybrid approach, maybe similar to college, where like you have your classes that you go into, but then maybe some people stay at school and work for a bit. Some people go home and work for the rest of the day. So I don't know. Time will tell. But
Oh, and I totally agree with Ashley too, that it does help to have some kind of designated workspace. I don't know, it's different for everyone, but at least for me, like just knowing like this is my work desk and this is where I do work. And because it is so hard to just turn it off and then just go in another room and just kind of like be done for the day. At least that's been a challenge for me. So I guess that's one thing that was kind of unexpected through this whole remote working, is like, when do you turn off work and turn off your notifications and just be at home? And then when do you go back to work? So something
Totally.
to think about.
Especially with students like coming out of all-nighters sometimes and just overworking yourself. You got to know your work-life balance, and making sure you guys are healthy and well is top priority. We all still struggle with that. So yeah, that and once you do get there, like communicating with your team, because some people are parents and they're doing school for half the day, and just it's like important more than ever to kind of understand what people's schedules are and making sure that you advocate for yourself too.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Thanks to our panelists for joining us remotely. Thank you, students, for joining us, and we have some alumni who joined us tonight as well. So hopefully you enjoyed this panel, and be sure to check out some of the other events we have going on this week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.